Hello, today's lesson is on volume of spheres. The volume of a sphere can be found by using the formula 4/3 times pi times r to the third power. That's very important. We're going to explore this formula in just a minute. Half a sphere is called a hemisphere, and you may have heard that word before. So let's write that. All right, so we're going to explore and see where this formula came from. If a cylinder and a sphere had the same radius and the same height, okay, so let's explore that. This is the same radius, so let's mark that. And the same height, so from here to here is the same thing as here to here. What says the height of the sphere would end up being 2r. So if I look at this, because of the sphere's shape, from the center to any point on it would be a radius. So there's a radius here and a radius here in any direction. So the height of this would also be 2 radius because it has the same radius. So the sphere would have 2/3 the volume of the cylinder. And we're going to use that fact to help us see how the formula's volume of spheres was derived by the table below. So the volume formula for a cylinder is pi r squared h, so the circle base times the height. And in this case, we're going to replace the height with 2r. Since these are both the same height, this has to be 2r also. So we have the circle base, pi r squared, times the height, which replace the height with 2r. So everything we've talked about right now has to do with the cylinder, but we want to know about the sphere. So the sphere is 2/3 the volume of the cylinder, so that's why we have the 2/3 times the circle base times the height. So it's this sphere is 2/3 of this. Now if I look at all those parts, how do we go from here to here? All those pieces, all those factors as they're called, because we're multiplying. So now it might be confusing how we went from step 3 to step 4. So I'm going to take the factors here that we have in step 3 and I'm going to move them around. And I like to particularly pay attention to our rational numbers. So I see 2/3 and I see 2. So I'm going to write those next to each other. 2 times 2/3. All of this is being multiplied. Then I'm going to shift pi. I'm going to put that in the middle. So now we have pi taken care of. And then I'm going to shift r squared. I'm not shifting it, I'm keeping it there, but I have another r times r. And so if you've been working on our exponent AT Math section, you might know what we need to do next. So let's take it piece by piece. Let's work with the rational numbers. Well, if you recall, when we multiply a whole number times a fraction, we want to convert the fraction to the whole number to a fraction, and 2 times 2 would be 4, 1 times 3 would be 3, and that's where the 4/3 came from. Then pi is sitting next to it, and then if we wrote this out the long way, the radius squared would be radius times radius, and now we have another radius, so we would write that as radius to the third power. So this is where this formula came from. So now let's try using it. So we're going to start with the exact answer. That's the easiest to find. That's where we leave the pi symbol in the math. And as we look at this, the only measurement we need is the radius. And I see the radius as 9 yards. So we're going to write that, 9 yards. Now, as usual, we always start with formula. Formula is volume of a radius, of a sphere equals 4/3 times pi times r to the third power. And again, I'm going to encourage you to go ahead and move 4/3 and the radius, whatever we substitute for the radius, next to each other. So because everything's being multiplied, we're allowed to move our factors wherever we want. Everything's being multiplied. So I'm going to now substitute 9, and I'm going to raise it to the 3rd power, and I'm going to put the pi symbol at the end. So would you take 9 and raise it to the 3rd power, or would you take 9 times 9 times 9 and then look back and check with the result? So we should have 4/3 times 729. That's what happens when we raise 9 to the 3rd power, and then we have the pi key. So now you have choices. If you have a calculator with a fraction key, you're going to take 4/3 times 729, or if you don't have a fraction key, you can take 4 times 729. Remember, we could use this 4 times 729, and that would equal our product, and 1 times 3, or 3 times 1 would be 3, so we can divide our product by 3. And if this is the way you chose to do this, is an equal sign, by the way, it would be 2,916. However, if you multiplied 4/3 times 729, it's going to go directly to the answer we'll now get if we divide by 3. So our final answer should be volume equals 972. That's 4/3 times 729, or we could have arrived at that answer by taking 4 times 729 and divided it by 3. And finally, we need our little pi symbol because it asks for the exact answer, and this would be yards to the 3rd power because it's volume. So I know this is involved, but let's try this again. Next, if we were asked to round, we would do exactly all of these same steps, and we would get here. So we do exactly the same steps. So this is what we would have so far. And now, in your calculator, please press 972 times pi. And please write down the digits that you see. So now when we go to write the answer, this is an estimation, or it's approximately, because we won't be able to use all of the digits of pi. So we should have 3,053. And if you have that handheld calculator, you'll have the same digits that I have. However, if you're using your iPad or another calculator that has more screen room, it might be a little bit different. Regardless, we're going to round now to the nearest tenth. So now we're going to round using what dot the, and we're either going to have 3,053 and 6/10 or 3,053 and 7/10. This 2 tells that 6 to stay. So our final answer, if we're rounding using the pi key, the volume would be approximately 3,053 and 6/10 yards to the 3rd power. So our last method, we're going to substitute 3.14 for pi. And so when we go to use this, we're going to have very similar steps. We're going to take volume equals 4/3 pi r to the 3rd power. I'm going to encourage you to switch these. And when we substitute, we're going to get 4/3 is not part of the substitute, it's part of the formula. Where the radius is, we're going to substitute 3. It's the same sphere throughout. And then this time, we're allowed to substitute for pi, and we can use 3.14, or 3 1400ths. I'm going to still encourage you, and by the way, I should have put approximately, I'm still going to encourage you to work with the squaring first. Actually, order of operations would tell us we need to do that first. And I'm still going to encourage you to save the 3.14 for last. So if we do this, then when we multiply this, we're still getting exactly the same answer we did when we use the exact answer and the pi key, we're going to get 972, but instead of the pi key or pi symbol, we're now going to multiply that by 3.14. So would you go ahead and multiply 972 by 3.14 and check back for the answer? So the answer is 3,052 and 800ths. And this would be yards to the third power. And once again, if I compare this answer with this answer, they're very close, but this one, again, is larger. The answer that we used as many digits of pi as we could is always going to be a little bit larger, but this is kind of the confirmation that this answer is correct. So I may have moved a little bit fast on this. If you need to go back or pause at any time and go back and play it, it's really important that you get this information because this is the last day that we'll have access to an iPad. So I want you to take these notes, and then when we return on Monday, you'll either continue on in this lesson if you didn't have time to finish the practice set, or you will use this time to go back and work on any of the past questions you did not have a chance to look at. I would take this opportunity, though, to use your iPad for any lessons that you may have missed. Have a great day, and see you next week. Thank you.